everyone, welcome back to our channel. I'm Emily Brady, co-owner and designer at Rustic Passion Studios. Today we have a cute new tumbler to show you all. It's kind of a boho botanical theme with a little reading gal on it, which that can be customized as well. I'm going to go over all the steps you need to do to be able to recreate this tumbler. I did it on a 30-ounce skinny, which is kind of my favorite size to do this one on, but you could do it really on any style. I'd avoid the curves just because we will be doing a peekaboo in laying down vinyl and then some printable vinyl, and those don't do so well with the curvy tumblers. So the skinny taper or straights are the ones I like to use. I will list everything I used on this tumbler down in the description box, as well as links to all the products on Amazon and some of my affiliate links. So go ahead and like and subscribe, and we will go ahead and get started. Thanks. To start off, I'm going to sand and prep my tumbler, and I am using this paint as my base coat. This is the Pop of Color paint. I believe the color is Jade. I bought this one from Counterculture DIY, and I really like these paints as a base coat over the spray paint, just because it keeps inside of the tumbler clean as you're not getting any overspray in there. And they're really nice and thick, so you only need one coat and then they are good to go. After the paint has dried, I'm going to go ahead and apply my glitter using the epoxy method. Typically I only use like 1 milliliter of epoxy when I'm doing a large tumbler like this. However, I'm going to use a little bit more epoxy on this cup as the paint is a chalk-like finish and it tends to absorb a little bit more of that epoxy. And I'm going to be using a chunky glitter. So I always like to use a little bit more epoxy when I'm doing those chunkies, just so that it gets kind of in between all of the pieces and it adheres well and lays nice and flat. The glitter I used on this tumbler was called Emerald Isle, and it is from Imagination Glitter Co. It is a beautiful green chunky mix glitter. It's kind of like a sage minty green that's a little bit softer, and it's just really pretty. So I went ahead and covered my entire tumbler with this glitter. And then after the tumbler's fully coated with the glitter, I want to get it all to lay nice and flat so that you don't get big, large, chunky pieces sticking up through your epoxy. Since this is a straight tumbler, I just go ahead and lay it on my parchment paper sheets and just kind of roll it and smooth down the glitter. I kind of wipe around the top rim and then smash around the bottom as well, just make sure everything's smooth. After that, I'm going to go ahead and add 2 coats of epoxy. I use the KS Resin LIQUIDY Split, and I like to do 2 full coats of that before going on to sanding, just so that it is nice and smooth. This is a 30-ounce tumbler, so for that first coat, I used approximately 40 milliliters of epoxy, since it kind of soaks into that glitter. And then after about 2 to 4 hours, when it was just a little bit tacky, I went ahead and added my second coat. And the second coat doesn't need quite as much, so I probably use more like 25 to 30 milliliters on that second coat. Then I go ahead and use my propane torch for about 2 full spins to pop any of the micro bubbles that might be under there. I do that right away after applying, and then also maybe like 5 to 10 minutes later, just if any bubbles make their way up to the surface that were hiding under the glitter. After that, I did go ahead and sand the tumbler. Got the rim completely smooth as well as the bottom, and we are going to be doing a peekaboo next. So you want to make sure that tumbler is really nice and smooth, because any bumps that are sticking up are going to show through with your spray paint. We are not doing any distressing, so you can spray over the sand marks as long as you use a finer grit sandpaper. If it's too coarse and you have some deep grooves in there, that may still show up through your spray paint. I use a 220 grit wet dry sandpaper, and I will link that down below as well. If your tumbler is still fairly bumpy even after sanding, feel free to go ahead and add another layer of epoxy. I would just do a really thin coat, around 15 to 20 milliliters, just to make sure that is nice and smooth before you add your decals for the peekaboo. For this design, I went ahead and used some Botanical line art illustrations. And I went ahead and just printed 4 different styles that I liked, approximately 5 to 6 inches each. I wanted them all just to be a little bit different, have a little different look and some different sizes to them. You can certainly use as many or as little as you would like. I just like to leave one kind of white portion on the front of the tumbler where the girl sitting in the chair and the decal are going to go. So I don't want to cover it too much with the peekaboos. Then I'm going to use my transfer paper to go ahead and just place all these illustrations just around the tumbler, kind of sporadically. Did 2 on the top and 2 on the bottom, just in a design that I thought would look nice and kind of complement each other with the curves of the tumbler and with each line drawing. The vinyl I'm using for these cutouts is the Aura Mask stenciling vinyl. I really like to use this for my peekaboos. It creates nice clean lines, but you could really use any vinyl. The Oracle 631, the removable one, works great for this. You can use the permanent one as well, however it does adhere a little more, and sometimes people will say that they kind of have a sticky residue left over from it. We will be pulling these off right away when the paint is dried, but use whatever you have on hand and whatever you prefer to use. I like to wrap a little bit of my design around the bottom of the tumblers. I kind of don't like just to have a straight edge down there. After your decals are all in place, it's time to go ahead and spray paint the tumbler. I'm just using the Rust-Oleum 2X flat white, and I went ahead and did 3 coats on this cup. I wanted it to be very opaque and not have any areas that were going to be lighter or splotchy at all. So 3 coats seemed to really be the perfect amount that I needed to get everything coated. Once you have done all your layers and they are fully dry, then you can go ahead and pull up your designs. It's really fun to see the glitter kind of shining through this bright white, and you just have to be very careful. These are very thin designs, very intricate, and sometimes the vinyl breaks apart, so you really have to go in there. I like to use the really fine point needle tweezers to pick these up and just be very soft so that you don't scrape along the paint at all. If you do happen to slip and scratch on the paint, use the spray paint to cover up your marks. So like spray a little bit of the white paint onto a piece of cardboard and use a little paintbrush to kind of fill in and paint that scratch. After you're done pulling up all your vinyl, we are going to move on and add another layer of epoxy. Here I'm using a little bit of Brite from Peachy Olive Glitters mixed into this layer of epoxy. You can use any fine cut opal white glitter really, and I just added a very small amount, and I'm only doing 20 milliliters of epoxy, if even that, on this layer. I like to keep the layers really thin on this tumbler since we do have a lot of layers to do, and this is just going to make it a nice glossy surface for our decals that we're going to add next. We're going to be doing the printable vinyl as well as the decal on the front of the tumbler. For the printable vinyl decals we're going to do next, I used a couple of different images off of Etsy, which I will list down below. For the girl, you can choose the hairstyles, the shirt colors, hair colors, all of that. And then I actually used the chair in the next image, this one here, and placed her on there, and it fit perfectly. And then there's lots of different plants and different wall hangings, and you can really just pick and choose whatever is your favorite. There's so many different options here that you can go with. After you pick out what you want, I've arranged them here on a letter-sized sheet in my silhouette. Turn on the registration marks, and then also I turn on the print bleed. That way when it cuts it out, you won't have any white space around your vinyl images, and it makes it a nice crisp clean line. When you go in to print this, I open up my printer settings, and yours are probably going to look different than this. I use an Epson EcoTink, and I set my paper type to semi-gloss and then the quality to high so that it will print really nice, and make sure you have your color setting on. And then I will go ahead and hit print on there. once it's printed in the send panel for my silhouette, you want to make sure you highlight everything and that you have it set to cut edge. So it's just going to cut around the outside pieces. Here you can see if you just go to cut, it's going to cut out her face, cut out the girl, and you don't want that. Everything that's connected, you want to cut around the edge. So make sure you select that, and then depending on your machine and blade, set the depth and force, and then go ahead and cut those out. For the vinyl decal, the well-read woman is a dangerous creature, I actually designed this one myself, and I do have it available in my Etsy shop for purchase as well. And I went with a dark green offset, and I only did like a 0.1 or 0.02 on that. I wanted a really fine, just a little outline around it. And then I use the matte gold for the top. And then I go ahead and layer those up together before placing them on my cup. Once I get that finished up, I'm going to decide what part of the tumbler I want to be the front and where I'm going to place the book lover girl as well as that vinyl decal. And then you can't use transfer paper on your printable vinyl as it kind of pulls the color up. So you just have to place these one by one, and these do cut out very fine. So you might have to grab little pieces at a time to put on. So I'm going to start with the girl and place her down here on the bottom since it's kind of the chair and the floor of the tumbler. And some of the plants weren't connected, so you have to get those off separately. And then the little rug here. And then sometimes there'll be little pieces that of like the trailing vines that come off, and you kind of have to place a leaf here and a leaf there. The little strings on top of the wall hangings are really fine and detailed, so kind of choose wisely what you want to place, depending too on how your machine cuts and things like that. And just kind of place them sporadically around your tumbler on what looks good to you. The next part that I placed was the stacked pots on another rug, and since that's kind of a ground level object, I wanted to have some symmetry to the tumbler, so I placed that along the back side of it. And then the hanging pots are hanging down from the top of the rim, and kind of the shelves and the wall hangings, it's kind of spread throughout around the middle. You'll notice I stand the cup up a couple times, and I do that with the words and those real straight horizontal shelf pots, and I just eyeball it to get it straight on there, and then I lay it back down to finish adding the rest of them. Once I have all my vinyl placed where I want it, I'm going to go ahead and seal the entire cup with the Quick Coat from Counterculture DIY. And this is like a polyacrylic, which some people use as well. You do not have to seal the printable vinyl as it is waterproof. However, I like to use the matte finish vinyl, and I find that it just releases a lot of air bubbles as the epoxy soaks in. And so this just really helps to eliminate all those extra micro bubbles so that you don't have to do extra sanding. I still get a few of them, but not too many, so it works out really great. Once that quick coat dries in just a couple of hours, I'm going to go ahead and add a layer of epoxy on the top. And I just do a very thin layer because I will have one more layer to finish off this tumbler. Once that layer of epoxy dries, I'm going to go ahead and wet sand the entire cup again. I have not sanded since we sprayed that white spray paint. So I'm just going to even up the spray paint to expose a little bit of that stainless steel on the top. And then go ahead and give a good sanding to the entire tumbler. There was a few little bubbles that popped up, so I'm going to smooth those all out. Make sure the bottom is level, and just have a good layer for the epoxy to adhere to next. Now the only thing left to do is add that final coat of epoxy. My preference for the last layer is the KS Ultra Art UV, and that just has some extra UV inhibitors and will keep this white cup nice and white for a very long time. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and if you have any questions, go ahead and leave them in the comments below and I will get back to you. Thanks for watching.